In the years leading up to the First World War, Britain and Germany spent millions on their navies. From 1898 to 1912, hundreds of new ships were constructed. The British Empire, the largest empire in the world, depended upon its navy for control. When Germany began to compete with them, Britain became worried. They had learned that strength at sea meant strength in war. Control of the seas not only provided supplies for you and your allies, but also prevented your enemy from doing the same. In this video, we are going to look at the war at sea between Britain and Germany. We will answer the following questions. Why did Britain impose a blockade on Germany? Who won the Battle of Jutland? And who won the war at sea? The blockade. So, what is a naval blockade, and why did Britain impose one on Germany? A naval blockade is a military strategy in which a naval force prevents ships and goods from entering or leaving a particular country. The objective of a naval blockade is to limit the enemy's access to essential resources, disrupt their supply chain, and weaken their military and economic capacity. In 1914, Britain possessed the most powerful navy in the world, and this put them in a great position when war broke out. Having the strongest navy gave Britain major advantages. Above all, it allowed Britain to impose a blockade on Germany. The Germans only had a small area of coastland in the north. Britain was quick to prevent German ships from accessing this area. It declared the whole of the North Sea as a war zone. All enemy ships that entered the North Sea were at risk of attack by the British Navy. Germany was in desperate need of steel, oil, coal, medicine, food, and other key resources. The blockade, however, threatened to starve Germany out of the war. The blockade, therefore, had a significant impact on Germany's ability to wage war. As well as causing shortages of essential goods such as food, the blockade also disrupted Germany's industrial production. Finally, the blockade prevented the Germans from receiving military supplies and reinforcements, and this weakened their military efforts. In 1916, therefore, Germany was in desperate need of a solution. The solution was to risk a full-scale attack. When war had broke out in 1914, both Britain and Germany had been reluctant to use the full force of their navies. They had spent so long and so much money building these navies up, they were reluctant to actually risk them in a full-scale fight. By 1916, however, the Germans were getting desperate, and the result of this desperation was the Battle of Jutland. The Battle of Jutland was the largest naval battle of the First World War. It was fought between the British Royal Navy and the German fleet on the 31st of May 1916. It took place in the North Sea off the coast of Denmark's Jutland Peninsula. The battle involved more than 250 warships and 100,000 men and lasted for over 12 hours. Like so many battles during the First World War, the story of Jutland is a story of a plan gone wrong. If there is one lesson about the war, it is this: plans always go wrong. In the words of the Prussian military strategist, Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke the Elder, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The German High Seas Fleet, under the command of Admiral Reinhard Scheer, planned to lure the British Grand Fleet, commanded by Admiral John Jellicoe, into a trap. They would achieve this by sending a small number of ships out into the North Sea to alert the British. Just a short distance behind, however, would be an enormous number of ships from the German fleet, and these ships would destroy whatever lay in front of them. There was, however, a problem. The problem was that the British knew the Germans were coming. At the start of the war, the British had captured Germany's naval codebook, and this meant that they could listen to and understand all of the German radio signals that the German ships sent to one another. On the 31st of May, as the German ships headed to the North Sea, the British were ready and waiting. The two fleets met and engaged in a fierce battle. The British had numerical superiority, with 28 dreadnoughts and 9 battle cruisers, compared to the Germans' 16 dreadnoughts and 5 battle cruisers. The German ships, however, appeared faster and more manoeuvrable. The battle was fought in poor visibility, which made it difficult for both sides to accurately target the enemy. Despite heavy losses on both sides, neither fleet achieved a decisive victory. The British lost 14 ships and 6,000 men, while the Germans lost 9 ships and over 2,500 men. The Battle of Jutland is a bit of a strange one then. A bit like the battles of the Somme and Verdun, it wasn't always that clear to establish who had actually won the battle. Both sides claimed victory. On the one hand, the Germans had suffered fewer casualties, but they had failed to break the blockade that was causing them so many issues. The British, on the other hand, had maintained their naval supremacy, but they hadn't achieved the decisive victory that might have knocked Germany out of the war altogether. Well, whoever had won the battle, one thing hadn't changed. The British Navy still controlled the North Sea, and the blockade on German shipping was going to continue. The Germans, therefore, reverted back to an approach that had suited them in the first 2 years of the war: submarine warfare. This was one area where Germans seemed to have the advantage. At the start of the war, the Germans engaged in a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. What this meant in practice was that any ships entering British waters were liable to be attacked by German submarines. This, shockingly, included non-military civilian ships. Thousands of ships came and went from Britain each week, many carrying vital supplies. The Germans knew that destroying these ships gave them a chance of knocking Britain out of the war. The German U-boat campaign proved highly effective. An average of 2 supply ships were sunk every day. This approach, however, did contain risks. If there was one country you didn't want to annoy during the war, it was the United States. The United States was something of a sleeping giant at this point. Germany's policy of unrestricted warfare, however, threatened to bring America into the war. In May of 1915, the Germans sunk a British ship called the Lusitania. 128 of the 1,000 passengers who drowned were American. This created a crisis for Germany. The Americans were furious. In response, however, the Germans decided, for the time being, that they would reduce their submarine attacks, hoping to not aggravate America any further. By 1917, however, the Germans were getting desperate once again. After the Battle of Jutland, they had been busy in constructing an ever larger submarine force. An additional 100 U-boats had been built. They resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, to great effect. They managed to sink so many supply ships that at one point Britain only had about 6 weeks left of resources. So, how did Britain solve this crisis and ultimately win the Battle of the Sea? The British came up with a number of effective solutions. The first solution was a convoy system. A convoy system is one where supply ships travel together in large groups. Protected by the British Navy and aircraft, this prevented U-boats from sinking British merchant vessels. Secondly, a series of defences were put in place in the English Channel. Minefields were set across the sea designed to explode U-boats. The British Navy also implemented depth charges. A depth charge was a weapon designed specifically to destroy submarines. They could be dropped into the water by ships and would only explode at a certain depth, hence the name. Finally, Q ships were introduced. A Q ship was a decoy ship. Designed to look like a simple unprotected merchant ship, these boats were actually equipped with weapons, and this allowed them to fight back against German submarines. Devastatingly for the Germans, by the middle of 1918, these tactics had proved very effective. They had sunk so many German U-boats that the Germans could not maintain this attack, and overall Britain had won the Battle of the Seas.